She served his table with a smile, but one word from her ended 3 careers, 2 marriages, and a criminal empire. He thought she was just a waitress. His fiancée thought she was nobody. They were both about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. This is a story about dignity, power, and what happens when the wrong people underestimate the right woman. The restaurant was the kind of place where people went to be seen. Marble floors, low lighting, a wine list thicker than most novels. Costello sat on the 42nd floor of a downtown tower, and on a clear night, the city sprawled beneath it like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. Marcus Hale had reserved the corner table by the window 3 weeks in advance. He was 34, broad-shouldered, and wore his success the way some men wore cologne, a little too much of it. He was a senior partner at Voss and Hale Acquisitions, a firm that specialized in buying struggling businesses and stripping them for parts. He was good at it. He had the car, the apartment, and the watch to prove it. Beside him sat Diane Cho, his fiancée of 7 months. She was sharp, beautiful, and laughed at a frequency that made nearby conversation stop. Not because it was unpleasant, because it was loud and proud and entirely unconcerned with anyone else in the room. They were celebrating. Marcus had just closed a deal that would net the firm $11 million. Diane had just been promoted to VP at her marketing agency. The night, by every measure, belonged to them. Their server arrived quietly. She was perhaps 30. Dark hair pulled back. A simple black uniform, the same as every other server in the restaurant. Her name tag read * Elena Starr. She moved with the kind of stillness that doesn't draw attention. Practiced, precise, invisible by choice. "Good evening," she said. "Welcome to Costello's. Can I start you with still or sparkling water?" Diane didn't look up from her phone. "Sparkling. And we'll need a few more minutes." "Of course." Marcus glanced up briefly. He noticed her the way people notice furniture, registering her presence without really seeing her. "Actually," he said, "we'll do the tasting menu. Both of us. And the sommelier pairing." Elena nodded. "Excellent choice. I'll let the kitchen know." She turned to go. That was when Diane laughed. It wasn't directed at anything specific. She'd seen something on her phone, a message from a friend, a reel, something meaningless. But the timing was what it was. Elena's back was turned. The laugh landed in the space between them like a stone dropped in still water. Elena paused. Just for a second. One breath. Then she continued walking, steady and unhurried, toward the kitchen. Marcus didn't notice the pause. Diane had already moved on to showing him whatever was on her screen. The wine arrived. The night continued. But 3 tables away, a man in a grey suit had noticed. He noticed because it was his job to notice. And because the woman they had just laughed at, the quiet one in the black uniform, the one they had already forgotten, was his employer. No one at Costello's knew the restaurant belonged to her. That was intentional. Elena Vasquez had structured her life the way a chess grandmaster structures a game. Layers of distance between the pieces that mattered and the hands that moved them. The restaurant was registered under a holding company. The holding company answered to a trust. The trust had a name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't already know everything. She had learned that from her father. And her father had learned it the hard way. Elena grew up in the back rooms of businesses like this one. Not the dining rooms, the back rooms. The ones with the mismatched chairs and the single bulb overhead and the conversations that stopped when children walked in. Her father, Rodrigo Vasquez, had built a quiet empire across 3 cities over 30 years. Import logistics on the surface. Beneath that, something older and more complicated that the family never named out loud. He died when Elena was 22. A heart attack, the doctor said. Elena had her doubts, but she buried them alongside him. What he left her was not money. The money came later. What he left her first was a ledger. Names, dates, amounts, and favors owed. A map of every relationship he had ever cultivated. She spent 2 years learning every page of it before she made a single move. By 28, she had tripled what he built. By 31, she had quietly acquired controlling interests in 14 businesses across the city, including Costello's, which he had purchased from a desperate owner for 40 cents on the dollar and turned into one of the most profitable restaurants in the region. She worked the floor sometimes. Not out of necessity. Out of discipline. She said it kept her honest. Her second in command, a composed man named Daniel Reyes, the one in the grey suit, 3 tables over, thought it was something else. He thought she did it because power, for Elena, had never been about distance. It had always been about presence. Tonight, Daniel watched her return from the kitchen and approach the bar with the same unhurried pace she always carried. He rose slightly from his chair, but she gave him a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. He sat back down. She poured a glass of water for herself behind the bar and stood for a moment, her back to the dining room. The couple by the window had already forgotten her. She could tell. She had watched enough people long enough to read the body language of dismissal. The man was pouring wine. The woman was leaning across the table toward him, her hand covering his. Whatever small moment had passed, it had already been erased from their evening. Elena set down her glass. There was a name she recognized now. She had placed it slowly, the way you place a piece of music you haven't heard in years. Marcus Hale. Voss and Hale Acquisitions. She knew that name. She knew it because 18 months ago, that firm had made a move on one of her logistics companies. A quiet, aggressive acquisition attempt that had cost her time and money to block. It had been handled. But she remembered names. Always. She picked up a menu from the bar and walked back toward the floor. The evening, she decided, had just become interesting. The tasting menu at Costello's ran 9 courses. Elena made sure of that personally. Each dish was a small argument, a case made in flavor and texture that the diner was somewhere worth being. The kitchen ran like a clock. The service moved like water. Nothing was accidental. She returned to the table by the window just as the 3rd course arrived. Seared scallop, she said, setting the plate before Diane with both hands, with a white truffle emulsion and a shaved fennel salad. The fennel is from a local farm about 40 minutes outside the city. Diane looked at the plate, then at Elena, then back at the plate. Can you take the fennel off? Elena paused. Of course. I'll have the kitchen prepare a fresh plate. No, just, Diane waved a hand. Just pick it off. It's fine. A beat of silence. Marcus shifted slightly in his chair. DI, they'll just make a new one. It's fennel, Marcus. I'm not asking her to rebuild the dish. Diane smiled at Elena, not unkindly, but not warmly either. The smile of someone who has never once considered whether the person across from them is tired. It'll take 2 seconds, right? Elena looked at the plate. Then she looked at Diane. I'll have the kitchen prepare a fresh one, she said. Quietly. Finally. It won't take long. She took the plate and walked back toward the kitchen without another word. At his table, Daniel had stopped pretending to read the menu. Inside the kitchen, Elena set the plate down on the pass and stood still for a moment. The head chef, a broad man named Gus, looked at her and then at the plate and read the situation immediately. New one, he said. New one, she said. He nodded and turned back to the stove without asking anything further. Elena stood at the edge of the kitchen for 30 seconds. She was not angry. Anger was a young person's luxury, and she had spent it all by the time she was 25. What she felt was something quieter and more precise, the specific weight of being treated as less than you are by someone who has no idea who they are talking to. She had felt it before. She had learned not to let it move her. She picked up the fresh plate and walked back out. The dining room hummed around her. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed softly near the bar. The city glittered below through the tall windows, indifferent and enormous. She set the plate in front of Diane. There you are, she said. Diane had already turned back to Marcus. She reached for the plate without looking up. Thanks. Elena began to turn away. Then Marcus said it. Quietly, leaning toward Diane, his voice carrying just far enough, the way voices do when people forget that rooms have ears. I don't know why they don't just hire people who actually speak English well enough to get the order right the first time. Diane covered her mouth. Laughed. Elena stopped walking. Her back was to them. Her hands were at her sides. 3 seconds passed. Then she continued to the next table, greeted the guests there by name, and recommended the lamb. But something had shifted. Quietly. Irrevocably. The way a crack moves through glass, invisible at first, until the whole thing falls. Daniel was already on his phone when she passed him. She didn't need to say a word. Daniel Reyes had worked for Elena for 6 years. Before that, he had worked for her father for 4. He had started as a driver, young, quiet, observant, and Rodrigo Vasquez had noticed those qualities the same way a jeweler notices an uncut stone. He had moved Daniel up slowly, deliberately, the way you build something meant to last. When Rodrigo died, Daniel had stayed. Not out of obligation. Out of choice. Elena had earned that. He sat now in the corner of Costello's with his phone in his hand, running a thread he had started the moment Elena's expression changed at that table. Not a dramatic change. Most people wouldn't have caught it. But Daniel had spent a decade reading Elena Vasquez, and he knew the difference between her neutral face and her still face. The neutral face meant nothing was happening. The still face meant something already had. Marcus Hale. He typed the name and sent it to a contact listed only as P. Within 4 minutes, his phone buzzed with a return message. A summary. Clean, factual, the kind of information that exists in the spaces between public records. Marcus Hale. 34. Senior partner, Voss and Hale Acquisitions. Net worth approximately $4.2 million, mostly tied to firm equity. Engaged to Diane Cho, 31, VP at Mercer Creative. The engagement had been announced 6 weeks ago on social media. The firm's recent deal, the one they were apparently celebrating tonight, involved the acquisition of a mid-size logistics company called Arroyo Freight. Daniel read that last line twice. Arroyo Freight. He set his phone face down on the table and picked up his wine glass, turning it slowly. Arroyo Freight was not just any logistics company. It sat at the edge of a network, a careful, intricate network that Elena had spent 3 years building and insulating. Arroyo was not one of her named holdings, but it was connected. A thread. One of 11 threads that, pulled hard enough, could begin to unravel things that needed to stay woven. He had assumed the Arroyo acquisition had been a coincidence. Opportunistic. The firm had moved on a struggling company and gotten lucky. It happened. But sitting here now, watching Marcus Hale laugh at something on his fiancé's phone while the city burned gold beneath the window, Daniel was no longer sure it was coincidence at all. He sent another message to P. Asterisk, how deep did Voss and Hale go on Arroyo before the acquisition? Did they see the subcontracts? Asterisk. The reply came in under 3 minutes. Asterisk, unknown. Possibly. They had a forensic accountant on the file for 6 weeks prior. Asterisk. Daniel placed his phone in his jacket pocket and folded his hands on the table. 6 weeks. A forensic accountant. That was not the behavior of a firm that stumbled into a deal. That was the behavior of a firm that was looking for something specific. The question was whether they had found it. And the deeper question, the one that sat at the bottom of everything like sediment, was whether Marcus Hale had walked into Costello's tonight by accident, or whether someone had told him exactly where Elena would be. Daniel looked across the room. Elena was at a table near the back, laughing softly at something an elderly couple had said. Warm. Present. Entirely composed. She hadn't checked her phone. She didn't need to. Whatever she knew, she had already known it before the evening started. That, Daniel understood, was what made her dangerous. Not the power she held, but how far ahead she always was. He reached for his water glass. At the table by the window, Marcus Hale ordered a second bottle of wine and told Diane this was only the beginning. He had no idea how right he was. The 9th course arrived at 10:47. A single square of dark chocolate, dusted with sea salt, resting on a white ceramic tile. The dessert looked simple. It was not. The chocolate was sourced from a single estate in Ecuador, tempered by hand each morning, and infused with an amount of espresso so precise it had its own entry in the kitchen's master recipe book. Elena carried it to the table herself. Marcus looked up when she set it down. Something had shifted in his eyes over the course of the evening. The wine, the hour, the loosening that happens when a man feels completely untouchable. He looked at her the way people sometimes look at a painting they've walked past 100 times and only just noticed. You've been our server all night, he said. I have, Elena said. You're good at this. He said it the way people say things they believe are compliments but are actually measurements. You really are. Diane was checking the time on her phone, already mentally somewhere else. Elena smiled. Thank you for spending your evening with us. She placed the leather bill folder on the table. Whenever you're ready. She turned to go. Actually, Marcus said. She stopped. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a business card. He held it out to her across the table, his posture easy, generous, the posture of a man doing someone a favor. I run a firm. We are always looking for people with good instincts and a strong work ethic. People who know how to read a room. He nodded toward the dining floor. You clearly do. If you're ever looking for something with more, he paused, searching for the word. Ceiling, give us a call. Diane glanced up then. She looked at the card, then at Elena, then at Marcus, with the expression of someone watching a mildly interesting scene from a comfortable distance. Elena looked at the card. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she reached into the small notepad pocket of her uniform and produced a card of her own. She placed it on the table beside the bill folder, face up, and slid it gently toward Marcus with 2 fingers. Thank you, she said. But I think you may want that. She walked away. Marcus looked down at the card. The front was simple. No logo. No title. Just a name, an address, and a phone number printed in clean black type. The name read, *Elena Vasquez. The address was the corporate headquarters of Vasquez Holdings Group, a building Marcus knew. Every acquisitions firm in the city knew it. Vasquez Holdings was not a rumor or a mystery. It was a name that appeared at the edges of deals the way weather appears at the edges of a forecast. You didn't always see it coming, but you felt it after. Marcus stared at the card. The color moved out of his face slowly, like water draining from a basin. He turned it over. On the back, in the same clean print, was a single line. *Arroyo Freight. Subcontract 7. We should talk. Diane leaned across. What is it? Marcus didn't answer. He opened the bill folder. Inside, there was no check. Instead, there was a single folded piece of paper. He opened it with hands that had gone very still. It was a document. 1 page. A copy of a subcontract agreement, Arroyo Freight, dated 14 months prior, bearing the signature of a shell company that traced back, through 4 careful layers, to Voss and Hale Acquisitions. They hadn't stumbled into Arroyo. They had been inside it for over a year. And Elena Vasquez had known the entire time. Marcus looked up. Across the restaurant, Elena was speaking with the maître d', her back straight, her voice inaudible. She did not look at him. She didn't need to. The elevator at Costello's was glass-walled on one side. As it descended, the city rose up around Marcus and Diane, 42 floors of light and steel in distance, and Marcus stood in the center of it feeling like a man falling in slow motion, watching the ground come up to meet him with perfect clarity and no ability to stop. Diane had the card in her hand. She had read the document twice in the elevator lobby before he managed to take it back and fold it into his jacket pocket. Now she was watching him with an expression he had never seen on her face before. Not anger. Not confusion. Calculation. How long? She said. D.I. How long has the firm been inside Arroyo? The elevator hummed. The city slid past the glass. It's complicated, Marcus said. It's a yes or no question, Marcus. He exhaled. 14 months. Maybe longer. The subcontract was already in place when I came onto the deal. Sheldon structured it before I. Don't. Her voice was quiet and precise, the way a scalpel is quiet and precise. Don't make this about Sheldon. Sheldon Voss. His partner. The other name on the door. 20 years older than Marcus, and 20 years deeper into the kinds of arrangements that don't get discussed in board meetings. Marcus had known, in the abstract way that people allow themselves to know things they don't want to examine, that Sheldon operated in grey spaces. He had told himself it wasn't his side of the business, that his deals were clean. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened and they stepped out into the marble atrium in silence. The doorman nodded. Outside, the city moved with its usual indifference. Cabs, headlights, the faint sound of music from somewhere down the block. Diane stopped walking. She knew who you were, she said. She knew the whole time. Yes. And she served us anyway. All night. Diane laughed, but it was a different kind of laugh than the ones upstairs. Smaller, with an edge underneath it. She served us and smiled and brought out a fresh plate of scallops and waited until the check to show us that she had us completely. Marcus said nothing. That document, Diane said. If that gets to the wrong people. I know. The firm, Marcus. Your license. Everything. I know. A cab slowed at the curb. Neither of them moved toward it. Diane turned to look at him fully then, and in the glow of the city at night he could see something settling behind her eyes, a decision being made in real time, the way concrete sets. Quietly, and then permanently. When she said subcontract 7, Diane said slowly, "What is subcontract 7? Marcus closed his eyes for just a moment. Because subcontract 7 was not just a financial arrangement. It was the thread that connected Arroyo Freight to 3 other companies, 2 offshore accounts, and a city council member who had facilitated a zoning approval 18 months ago in exchange for something that had never been written down anywhere. Anywhere except, apparently, whatever file Elena Vasquez had been quietly building for over a year. "It's bad," he said. Diane nodded. Once. The way people nod when they've already arrived somewhere and just needed the confirmation. She picked up her phone and stepped away from him toward the curb, her back turned, already dialing. Marcus stood alone on the sidewalk outside Costello's and looked up at the 42nd floor, where the lights of the restaurant still glowed warm and gold against the dark sky. Somewhere up there, Elena Vasquez was finishing her shift. He wondered if she was watching him. He suspected she already knew exactly what Diane was doing. He suspected she had known that too. Diane Cho did not go home that night. She took a cab across town to a building on Mercer Street that housed, among other things, the offices of a man named Gerald Fitch. Gerald was 61, silver-haired, and carried the particular confidence of someone who had spent 3 decades knowing where bodies were buried, sometimes literally. He was a fixer, the kind that didn't advertise and didn't need to. Diane had known Gerald for 4 years. She had brought him 2 situations in that time. He had made both of them disappear cleanly and without sentiment. She trusted him the way you trust a tool that has never failed, not with warmth, but with certainty. She was in his office by midnight. Gerald listened without interrupting. He had that quality, the ability to absorb information without reacting to it, the way deep water absorbs a stone. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up a pen and wrote a single name on a notepad and turned it toward her. Elena Vasquez. "You're sure it was her?" he said. She gave him her card. Vasquez Holdings. Gerald set the pen down. "Then this isn't a complication," he said. "This is a war. And you need to understand something before you decide your next step." He folded his hands on the desk. Elena Vasquez does not make moves. She completes them. Whatever she showed Marcus tonight was not a threat. It was a door she was opening, and she controls what's on the other side. Diane held his gaze. "Can we get ahead of it?" "Depends on what ahead means to you." "The document. The subcontract. Is there a way to?" "To what?" Gerald said. "She has a copy. She has the original, probably. She's had it for 14 months, Diane. If she wanted to burn Marcus with it, he would already be burning." He leaned back. "She wants something. That's why she showed him. The question is what?" Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised even Gerald. "What if it's not Marcus she wants?" Gerald looked at her. "Sheldon structured the subcontract," Diane said. "Marcus told me tonight. Sheldon built the Arroyo arrangement before Marcus even came onto the deal." She paused. Marcus is the name on the card she handed back. But Sheldon Voss is the name that actually connects to those offshore accounts, to the council member, to everything underneath. Gerald was very still. "You think she's using Marcus to get to Sheldon," he said. "I think she's been using the whole firm to get to Sheldon," Diane said. "And I think tonight was her way of telling Marcus that she knows, and that he has a choice." The office was quiet. Somewhere outside, a siren moved through the city and faded. Gerald picked up his pen again. "If that's true," he said carefully, "then the most dangerous thing you can do right now is get between Elena Vasquez and Sheldon Voss." He looked at her. "And the smartest thing Marcus can do is cooperate with her completely." Diane stood up and smoothed her jacket. "Marcus won't do that," she said. "He'll protect Sheldon. He always does. That's the problem." She picked up her bag. "So I need you to find out everything Elena Vasquez has," she said. "Not to use against her. To know how far this goes." She paused at the door. Because if Marcus won't protect himself, someone has to decide whether to protect him anyway. She left without saying goodbye. Gerald sat alone in his office for a long time after that. He had handled complicated situations before. Situations with layers, with competing interests, with people who thought they were playing each other while someone else was playing them all. But he had a feeling, the particular feeling of a man who has seen enough to recognize a current beneath still water, that Diane Cho had just walked out of his office having already made the decision she'd come in pretending to be uncertain about. He picked up his phone. He needed to know more about Elena Vasquez. He had a feeling what he found would change everything. He was right. 3 days passed. Marcus didn't sleep well in any of them. He went to the office. He answered emails. He sat across from Sheldon Voss in their weekly partners meeting and watched the older man talk about pipeline deals and Q4 projections and said nothing. Sheldon was 62, broad, deliberate, a man built for endurance rather than speed. He had the steady eyes of someone who had never once been surprised by the worst in people because he had always been prepared for it. Marcus had tried, twice, to bring up Arroyo. Both times, he had stopped himself. On the morning of the 4th day, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered it on the second ring because some part of him had been waiting for it. Mr. Hale. The voice was calm. Familiar. He recognized it immediately. Ms. Vasquez, he said. A brief pause. I'd like to meet. Today, if possible. Costello's. 2 o'clock. Another pause. Just you. She hung up before he could answer. He was there at 1:55. The restaurant was different in the afternoon. Quieter, stripped of its evening drama, light coming in long and flat through the tall windows. A few tables occupied by business lunches. The city visible below in its daylight grey. Elena was already seated at the corner table by the window. The same table he had reserved 3 weeks ago. She was not in uniform. She wore a dark blazer over a white shirt, her hair down, a single ring on her right hand. In front of her was a glass of water and a thin manila folder. She did not stand when he approached. She gestured to the chair across from her. He Saturday. For a moment neither of them spoke. The city moved below the window. A server appeared and Marcus ordered coffee without looking at the menu. You know why you're here, Elena said. It was not a question. I have a reasonable idea, Marcus said. She opened the folder and placed 3 documents on the table, turning them to face him. He looked at them slowly. The subcontract, a financial transfer record, and a photograph, printed, clean, of Sheldon Voss entering a building Marcus recognized as the private office of Councilman Ray Delaney, dated 16 months ago. Subcontracts 7 through 11, Elena said. The transfers from the Arroyo offshore account to a holding entity that traces back to Delaney's re-election fund. And Sheldon, 6 days before the zoning approval that allowed 3 of my logistics routes to be legally disrupted. She paused. Your firm didn't acquire Arroyo by accident. Sheldon targeted it specifically because of its proximity to my network. He wanted leverage. Marcus stared at the photograph. He never found it, Elena continued. But he caused damage trying. Real damage. People lost work. Routes were shut down for months. Her voice didn't rise. It never rose. I don't forgive that easily. What do you want? Marcus said. From you. Very little. She picked up her water glass. Sheldon built this without your knowledge. I believe that. Which means you have a choice available to you that he doesn't. She set the glass down. I want a full internal audit disclosure. Everything Sheldon touched on Arroyo goes to the relevant authorities. You cooperate fully. The firm restructures without him. Marcus was quiet for a long time. That's the end of everything we built, he said. The end of what Sheldon built, Elena said. Using your name. The coffee arrived. Marcus didn't touch it. And if I say no, he said. Elena looked at him with an expression that was not unkind. It was simply honest, the expression of someone who has already seen every possible version of this conversation and is patiently waiting for the person across from them to arrive at the one that matters. Then all of this, she said, touching the folder gently, finds its way to people who will not offer you a choice. The room was very quiet. Marcus looked at the documents, at the photograph, at the window and the city below it. Then he heard the door of the restaurant open behind him. He turned. Sheldon Voss stood in the entrance of Costello's, his coat still on, his eyes moving across the room until they found Marcus, and then found Elena, and stopped. Someone had told him. Marcus turned back to Elena. Her expression had not changed by a single degree. Did you? He started. No, she said simply. And then, almost gently, but I knew he would come. Sheldon began walking toward the table, and with every step the air in the room seemed to compress, and Marcus understood with sudden, crystalline certainty that this moment, this exact convergence of the three of them at this window, above the city, had not happened to Elena Vasquez. She had built it. Every piece of it. From the moment he had reserved that corner table 3 weeks ago. Sheldon Voss had not survived 62 years by being slow. He read the table in under 3 seconds. Marcus. Elena. The open folder. The documents facing outward. He catalogued it the way a general catalogues a battlefield. Quickly, coldly, already calculating retreat. He pulled out the third chair and sat down without being invited. Ms. Vasquez, he said. His voice was steady. Impressed, almost, in the way that predators sometimes recognize each other. I've wanted to meet you for some time. I know, Elena said. Sheldon glanced at the documents. He didn't touch them. You've been thorough. I had good reason to be. A silence settled over the table. Below the window, the city continued its indifferent motion. Traffic, pedestrians, the slow turn of ordinary life entirely unaware of what was happening 42 floors above it. Sheldon leaned back in his chair and looked at Elena with the careful patience of a man buying time. Whatever you think you have. I don't think, Elena said. I know. And so do you. She closed the folder. Subcontracts 7 through 11. The Delaney transfers. The zoning interference. 14 months of documented damage to my network, traceable in full to decisions you made deliberately. She paused. I also know about the warehouse on Caulfield Street, and the arrangement you made with 2 of my former drivers. Sheldon's jaw tightened. Almost imperceptibly. But it tightened. Marcus watched him. And in that small movement, that single crack in the older man's composure, he saw for the first time the full shape of what Sheldon had built and what it had cost and what it would cost further. He thought about the drivers. He thought about the zoning approval and the routes that had shut down and the people behind those routes who had simply lost their livelihoods while he and Sheldon had celebrated quarterly numbers in a glass office. He thought about a woman in a black uniform bringing a fresh plate of scallops to a table of people who didn't deserve the care. He reached across and picked up the folder. Tell me where to sign, he said to Elena. Sheldon turned to him sharply. Marcus. It's done, Sheldon. Marcus met his eyes. Held them. It was done before we walked in here. We just didn't know it yet. Sheldon looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then at Elena. Then at the city beyond the glass, sprawling wide and indifferent in the afternoon light. Something moved behind his eyes. Not regret, perhaps, but its distant cousin. The recognition of a game fully lost. He stood. Straightened his coat. And without another word, he walked out of Costello's the same way he had walked in, steadily, deliberately, and was gone. Elena watched him go. Then she reached into her jacket and produced a second document, thicker than the others, and placed it in front of Marcus. Cooperation agreement, she said. My legal team prepared it. Your disclosure goes to the Financial Crimes Unit and the City Ethics Board simultaneously. In exchange, your personal liability is substantially reduced. The firm can continue under new structure and a new name, if you choose. Marcus looked at the document, then at her. Why? He said. Why give me the option at all? After everything. Because you didn't build this, Elena said simply. And because how people are treated when no one is watching tells you everything about who they actually are. A pause. You weren't kind to me that night. But you weren't cruel by design. There's a difference. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I didn't even see you, he said. That's the truth of it. I looked right at you and didn't see you. Most people didn't, Elena said. That was useful to me for a long time. She picked up her water glass. It doesn't have to be useful anymore. He signed the document. She witnessed it. Folded her copy. Slid his copy across the table. They sat for a moment in the afternoon quiet of the restaurant, the one she owned, in the city she had learned to navigate from the back rooms of other people's businesses, using a ledger her father had left her and a kind of patience that most people would never understand because most people had never needed it. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. She looked at him. The night we came in. When Diane laughed. He paused. Was that the moment? Is that when you decided? Elena considered the question honestly. I decided 14 months ago, she said, when your firm first touched Arroyo. She set down her glass. That night just showed me the kind of people I was dealing with. It didn't change my plan. It confirmed I didn't need to change it. Marcus nodded slowly. He stood, picked up the document, looked out the window at the city one last time from that height, that angle, the way he had looked at it 3 weeks ago, believing it belonged to him. It looked different now. Not smaller, just more honestly proportioned. Thank you, he said, and meant it in a way he couldn't fully articulate. Not for mercy, exactly, but for clarity. For being shown the shape of something he had been standing inside of without knowing. He left. Elena sat alone at the corner table by the window. Daniel appeared beside her after a moment, quiet as always, and set a fresh glass of water on the table without being asked. Sheldon, she said. His attorney called hours 20 minutes ago, Daniel said. He'll cooperate independently. He doesn't want a trial. Elena nodded. Outside, the city moved. Below them, somewhere on the sidewalk, Marcus Hale was walking away from a version of his life he would never return to, towards something he hadn't yet named. It might be smaller. It might, in time, be better. That part was his. Elena picked up the water glass. She had grown up in back rooms. She had buried her father. She had learned a ledger by heart and built a structure of such careful, patient complexity that the people who moved against her had done so without ever knowing they were already inside it. She had been laughed at. She had brought a fresh plate of scallops. And then she had waited, the way her father taught her, for the right moment. Not to punish, not to destroy, but to correct. To restore the weight of things to their proper balance. She looked out at the city. It had always been hers. It just looked different now that everyone knew it.